This is not a war of armies. It's a war of systems.
We study the effects of seventh-generation warfare on the common individual.
Algorithmic exclusion. Infrastructure coercion.
It shapes what you see.
What you buy.
And what you fear.
We study on how seventh-generation tools touch daily life.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into some dense material. We've sifted through a stack of specialized documents to pull out what they call the core actionable truth.
That's right.
This dive is centered on what these sources label the insidious connection. It's an analysis of a strategic conflict model they actually term seventh-generation hybrid warfare.
And it's quite a framework they lay out. The material connects massive, almost overwhelming geopolitical chaos, really high-level technology, and what's described as a deliberate, almost algorithmic process.
Aimed at what exactly?
Aimed at dissolving national identity. Not destroying it in a conventional sense, but dissolving it. Our goal here, to be very clear, is just to map the operation as described in these documents. We're not endorsing, just analyzing.
Right, objective analysis.
Exactly. We're using their own structure. Actually, they frame it using the Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Precisely. A manufactured thesis or problem, a controlled antithesis or reaction, and then a pre-planned kinetic synthesis, the solution. It helps us examine their claims about this insidious connection impartially, sticking just to the aletheia presented.
Okay, so we've broken this down into three main chunks for you. First, the physical problem. This huge, allegedly engineered flow of people coming through the Darien Gap. They call it the Psyche-War problem, an attack on the physical body of the state.
Suma, yes, the physical.
Then second, the mental reaction. This is what they term the Technocrat psyche smog, supposedly designed to hide the real mission and get everyone on board with the proposed changes.
The psychological conditioning, essentially?
And finally, the kinetic solution. The actual nuts and bolts, the technological architecture of something called the digital wall prototype. We really need to get into the weeds on all three of these. Okay, let's unpack this first part. All right, so the starting point for this whole alleged seventh-gen warfare mission, according to the sources, is the physical crisis itself. The documents are pretty blunt about it. They argue the mass migration we see at the Darien Gap isn't just a spontaneous tragedy.
No, they frame it very differently.
They call it a deliberately engineered funnel. This is the thesis, the big manufactured problem.
Right.
And the explicit design, they claim, is to overwhelm the physical capacity, the soma of the target nation.
Which in this specific analysis is identified as the United States.
Right.
And if the goal is genuinely overwhelming state capacity, well, the sheer scale described in the sources would certainly provide that kind of shock. The documents don't really talk about it as just migration.
How do they frame it?
They use terms like an operational invasion. Quantitatively, the numbers cited are, frankly, staggering. A record 520,085 individuals documented crossing just the Darien Gap in 2023 alone.
500,000 people through that one bottleneck.
And the sources emphasize this isn't just a number, it's characterized as an optimized continuous flow. It's allegedly calibrated specifically to exceed the administrative, the physical, and the financial processing capacity of the systems meant to handle it.
Optimize. That implies controlled direction.
Yeah.
And it's not just the volume, is it? It's also about who is flowing and where they're going.
Exactly. The sources claim this is a highly targeted vector. An estimated 96% of that documented flow, they state, is explicitly destined for the United States.
96%. So not just a regional issue spilling over.
Not according to this analysis. It argues this focus immediately shifts the narrative from, say, a general humanitarian problem to a specific targeted national security dilemma for the U.S. And a dilemma on that scale seems to demand a radical, probably centralized solution.
Which leads into the national security angle the documents really hammer home. They talk about an adversarial component. What exactly do they mean by that?
This is where the sources claim the funnel isn't just carrying migrants, but it's being actively used to insert what they term a fifth column. This includes non-state actors, potentially agents from hostile states.
And they quantify this.
They do. The analysis cites over 176,000 individuals in that flow, originating from nations the sources designate as adversarial nation states.
176,000.
Yeah.
It's a huge number to vet.
It is, and the documents argue the sheer volume of unvetted or difficult to vet individuals moving towards a single target creates an immediate critical demand, a demand for something radically different in terms of security screening, something faster, more comprehensive, more technological.
They give examples of this, right, to illustrate the vetting challenge.
Yes, very specific ones. They highlight, for instance, the surge in encounters with Chinese nationals, particularly in the San Diego sector of the U.S. border.
What kind of surge are we talking about?
Exponential. The sources state the numbers increased by 318 times. It went from just 75 individuals in fiscal year 2021 to nearly 23,890 in fiscal year 2024.
318x.
Yeah.
That's not gradual.
No. And the documents argue this kind of rapid, almost sudden influx of individuals from security-sensitive regions proves, in their view, that traditional methods, paper documents, human interviews, database checks are completely overwhelmed, obsolete even.
And this manufactured obsolescence, this breakdown of the old system, that creates the opening.
That's the core argument. It establishes the demand, the urgent, undeniable need for the technological fix they claim was already waiting in the wings. The non-repudiable digital wall. The crisis creates the market for the solution.
Okay, but a movement of 500,000 people, sustained over time, that requires logistics. It can't just happen spontaneously across thousands of miles, can it?
That's precisely the next point the analysis tackles. It requires facilitators to ensure flow continuity.
Facilitators, who are they talking about?
The documents focus heavily on the operational role of non-governmental organizations, NGOs. They specifically name groups like HIAS and the Jesuits, among others.
And what role did the sources claim these NGOs play? Is it just humanitarian aid?
The sources argued their function, while appearing purely humanitarian, serves an operational purpose within this alleged hybrid warfare model. The claim is they stabilize the vector and ensure flow continuity.
Okay, hang on. Stabilize the vector. That sounds technical. Are the sources saying these groups are intentionally malicious or that their actions, however well-intentioned, are being leveraged?
That's a really crucial distinction. The sources mostly make the argument based on functional analysis. They look at what the logistical support does.
Like what?
Things like providing transit guidance, temporary shelter, food, maybe initial processing or legal advice. The argument is that this support optimizes the funnel. It reduces the friction.
So it makes the journey more survivable, more efficient?
Yes. And the sources contrast this with, say, just dealing with a crisis locally where it occurs. They argue this facilitation ensures the flow doesn't break down prematurely. It ensures the product, the overwhelming human flow, reaches its intended destination, the U.S. border, at the scale required to trigger the next phase.
The reaction phase, the antithesis.
Exactly. By stabilizing the flow, the argument goes, these facilitators ensure the problem remains critical, stays in the headlines, and generates the necessary political pressure and public outcry needed for the next stage of the dialectic.
So to sum up part one, the thesis, it's presented as a physical attack on the state's body, the soma, a deliberately engineered, overwhelming flow of people, highly targeted, containing concerning demographics, and facilitated to ensure it reaches maximum impact.
Correct. And a massive physical problem designed specifically to provoke a very particular psychological and political response.
Which brings us right to part two, the antithesis.
So, the antithesis, as defined in this material, isn't a physical thing. It's described as a purely psychological operation. The sources use this rather evocative term, psyche-smog.
Psyche-smog, okay. And who's creating this smog?
It's attributed to a group they provocatively label hollow crown technocrats.
Hollow crown technocrats.
Yeah.
Sounds like something out of a novel.
It's certainly colorful language, but the alleged purpose is deadly serious. To completely obscure the real operational mission, what the documents call the agauge, the underlying strategy, and, critically, to generate broad consent from institutions, from the public.
Except for what?
For the pre-planned technological solution, a one designed, ultimately, to manage and monitor everyone, not just migrants.
So the smog is the cover story. How do they break down this narrative manipulation?
They contrast the public-facing language, which they call the pseudos, the false narrative, the spin, with what the documents claim is the aletheia, the true mission, the hidden objective.
Okay, so what's the pseudos? What's the stuff we hear all the time?
It's language that resonates, right? Humanitarianism, financial inclusion, dignity, helping the vulnerable, creating a borderless world, even environmental angles like carbon offsets. All very positive framing.
Sounds familiar. And the hidden aletheia behind this?
According to the documents, the real objective masked by this language is the core strategy of seventh-generation warfare. Specifically, the systematic dissolution of national identity and laying the groundwork for what they term AI gods.
AI gods. Okay, that's a leap. How does humanitarian language lead to AI gods?
The claim is that the language of compassion, inclusion, and efficiency acts like a powerful social anesthetic. It makes people receptive, or at least not resistant, to deploying the necessary infrastructure, digital IDs, tracking systems, centralized databases that form the backbone of this future algorithmic control. You accept the premise of helping, and you inadvertently accept the tools of control.
And the sources try to link this smog directly to influential figures.
Yes, they don't just leave it as an abstract concept. They provide specific analysis linking the stated philosophies and political views of key Silicon Valley figures directly to this dissolution mission. They try to show it's not just theory, but that powerful individuals are actively pushing this agenda.
Who do they name?
Well, they dedicate significant space to Peter Thiel, for instance. They connect his known belief, which he stated publicly, that freedom and democracy are incompatible.
He really said that.
Oh, yes. They link that belief to his advocacy for something called neo-cameralism.
Neo-cameralism, what is that?
It's basically a governance model run like a business. Think of countries as corporations, with CEOs or founders having absolute authority rather than democratic processes. The sources argue this philosophy directly undermines democratic norms and national sovereignty, paving the way for rule by technical elites. A perfect fit, they argue, for the logic of a digital wall replacing traditional borders.
Okay, so Thiel represents the anti-democratic angle. Who else?
Mark Andreessen is another key figure cited. He's highlighted for promoting the idea that a borderless world is essential for technological progress.
How so?
The sources point to his fairly radical stance against things like social responsibility or ethics when they potentially slow down technological advancement. He sees them as enemies of progress. The argument is that by pushing for this frictionless, borderless world governed by tech elites and eventually superintelligence, he's actively working to dissolve national identities because they represent friction in the network.
Borders as bugs in the system, basically.
That's a good way to put it. Then there's Balaji Srinivasan and his concept of the network state.
I've heard of that. Communities formed online, that crowdfund territory.
Exactly. It's framed as a post-national model. The sources connect this idea of tech-driven separatism to his philosophical leanings towards something called AI polytheism.
AI polytheism, multiple AI gods.
Essentially, yes. Decentralized AIs, maybe developed by these different network states, acting as new forms of governance or intelligence. The analysis in the documents calls this the ultimate dissolution of the one aletheia, meaning the destruction of any single shared truth or sovereign identity, replaced by competing algorithmic systems. Governance by algorithm, fundamentally.
This is all very philosophical, though. How do they connect it back to the actual tech being deployed now?
They bridge that gap by examining Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. They highlight the contrast.
Between what?
Between his public statements, often at places like the World Economic Forum, where he frames digital ID in terms of borderless inclusion, empowerment, helping the unbanked, very positive language.
The pseudos again.
Right. And the counterclaim in the documents that his company, Microsoft, is allegedly the architect of the actual control infrastructure being tested. Specifically, providing the Dynamics 365 CRM system used by NGOs like HIS for tracking.
So public talk of inclusion, private building of control systems.
That's the allegation. The sources argue this global push for reimagining digital ID for seamless mobility is the necessary psychological cover. It normalizes the idea of algorithmic governance creeping in and eventually overriding national sovereignty, all under the banner of progress and helping people.
So the psyche smog is the crucial lubricant. The shock of the physical invasion, the thesis, creates the need for a big response. And the rhetoric of humanitarianism and borderless tech progress, the antithesis, gets the public to accept a solution that involves highly sophisticated surveillance and control.
That's the model presented. The philosophy justifies what the physical chaos necessitates.
Which brings us to the actual solution being implemented. This is where it stops being just talk and philosophy and becomes, as the sources say, kinetic. If the engineered invasion is the problem and the humanitarian language is the reaction, what is the actual physical deployed solution? The synthesis.
Okay, so the synthesis, the documents are unequivocal here. They state the synthesis is the digital wall. And crucially, they define this not as a physical barrier, not concrete and steel.
Like the old border wall ideas.
Exactly, not that. Instead, it's defined as a cloud-based data control system. And the key claim is that it's not theoretical. It's being actively beta tested right now, using the migrants moving through the Darien corridor as the test subjects.
Beta tested, so it's operational.
Operational, kinetic. That's
Yeah.
the assertion.
Okay, let's get specific. Who's building it? What's the prototype? The documents name names, right?
They do. They point directly to Microsoft as the architect, specifically through their Dynamics 365 CRM system. This system was provided, they claim, to major NGOs involved in the migrant flow, with HIAS cited prominently.
Dynamics 365. Isn't that a business software, like for sales teams and customer service?
It is. It's a commercial, enterprise-level customer relationship management platform.
So how does a CRM become an operational SOMA prototype for national security? How is that kinetic? That seems like a stretch.
Well, this is what the sources call the core insidious connection. Dynamics 365 isn't just a simple database or spreadsheet. It's described as a sophisticated engine designed for continuous data normalization.
Data normalization, meaning what?
Meaning it takes all the messy, chaotic, fragmented data points collected about migrants, things like partial travel histories, where they stopped, who they were with, family relationships mentioned in interviews, maybe health details, religious affiliations stated, all these scattered bits of information.
Okay.
And it converts all that chaos into a standardized, single, unified longitudinal record for each individual, a unique digital profile that tracks them over time.
So it creates a coherent file from incoherent data.
Precisely. And that standardized profile is exactly what's needed for state security agencies to monitor people at scale. It's also essential for imposing future consequences or controls. It makes millions of individual data points instantly understandable and actionable for large-scale automated systems enforcement, threat assessment, you name it.
So the CRM is the engine that turns the messy human reality into clean, machine-readable intelligence.
That's the function described. And the sources detail how this digital wall architecture, built on that CRM foundation, requires two fundamental links to work. Two components that create a control loop on the population being beta tested.
What are the two links?
First, there's what they call the gate. This is the ID component. It's achieved through mandatory biometric registration.
Mandatory. You can't opt out.
According to the sources, no.
Yeah.
If you come through the official processing points in the Darien region, you are registered. This is implemented using systems like those run by Panama's National Border Service, Sunafront, often working hand in glove with the UNHCR's PRIMES Global Identity Management System.
PRIMES. That's
Yeah.
the UN Refugee Agency system.
Yes. The point emphasized is mandatory. This step establishes the unique, non-negotiable digital identity. The digital key, essentially, needed for tracking and for accessing any subsequent services. You cross the gap, you enter the system. That's the gate.
Okay, so mandatory biometric ID is the gate. What's the second link?
The second link is the rail. This is the money component. The biometric ID created at the gate is then linked directly to digital financial control.
Financial control. But how? Many of these people are likely unbanked, right? They probably don't have traditional accounts.
Correct. And this is where the sources point to the leverage of existing commercial systems. The financial control isn't established through some futuristic crypto token, not yet anyway. It's done using conventional but highly monitorable tools. Prepaid debit cards.
Standard prepaid cards.
Yes, issued by regional banks. Banesco Panama is specifically named. These cards operate on the global commercial payment networks we all use. Visa and MasterCard are cited.
So what makes that a control mechanism? I can use a prepaid card anonymously.
But the crucial point here, according to the sources, is the linkage. The card isn't anonymous in this system. It's directly tied to the unique biometric ID established at the gate.
I see. So every time that card is used.
Every transaction, buying food, paying for transport, accessing shelter, creates a data point. a digital breadcrumb tied directly to your unique biometric identity. It creates a fully monitorable financial rail.
That provides a powerful lever.
A powerful, constant lever for tracking movement, monitoring behavior, and potentially enforcing compliance through financial means. Turn off the card, perhaps? The sources argue it transforms a seemingly humanitarian financial aid tool into a sophisticated mechanism of control.
Okay, so you have the ID gate and the money rail built on the CRM data foundation. Now, the documents talk about adding high-end security layers on top of this, what they call the insidious connection for intelligence harvesting. Who's involved there?
This is where the analysis points to specialized tech contractors, specifically firms founded by or heavily staffed with what they term Unit 8200 alumni.
Unit 8200, that's the Israeli military intelligence unit, known for cyber expertise.
That's the one. These firms are described as providing crucial advanced capabilities like sophisticated identity resolution, figuring out who people really are, even with aliases or fragmented data, and complex data fusion services.
Data fusion, like combining different data sets.
Exactly, combining the humanitarian data from the Dynamics 365 CRM with other intelligence streams, maybe signals intelligence, open source intelligence, watch lists. This is where, according to the sources, the normalized humanitarian data becomes a full-blown military-grade intelligence asset. These security modules are layered onto the base CRM data.
So the claim is these specialized contractors are essentially harvesting an intelligence goldmine from the data collected initially for aid purposes.
That's the assertion. They turn standardized case management files into comprehensive, real-time threat assessment tools. The system's architecture is presented as a perfect dual-use machine. Humanitarian front-end, intelligence back-end.
Wow. Okay, so if that's the technical architecture, how does this whole operation sustain itself? How does it expand? The documents talk about a lucrative feedback loop, right?
Yes, and this is critical to understanding the alleged long-term strategy. It's described as a sophisticated four-stage cycle designed to basically convert geopolitical influence and chaos into perpetual profit and system expansion. It creates the incentive to keep the crisis going.
All right, let's break down the 4 stages. Stage 1.
Right.
Buying influence in South America.
Correct. The sources provide a very specific example involving Microsoft's Climate Innovation Fund. Microsoft reportedly provides Panama with a substantial amount of money. $70 million is the figure cited, earmarked for carbon credits.
$70 million. That buys a lot of goodwill.
Exactly. The analysis claims this large, sustained financial investment secures extraordinary political capital and influence. Enough influence for Panama to align its national data infrastructure policies with the deployment goals of this digital wall system.
But why carbon credits? Why not just fund, say, border infrastructure directly? That seems odd.
The documents argue this is technically brilliant in a way. For carbon credits, especially verified carbon credits, VCCs, to be considered legitimate and globally tradable, they need an extremely high-integrity digital verification system. Meaning the system has to prove, without doubt, where the carbon offset project is, who's running it, that it's actually sequestering carbon. It requires uncompromised, non-repudiable identity verification and precise location tracking systems.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
The sources argue that this high-integrity technical requirement, mandated for the environmental VCC program, creates the perfect pre-approved technical justification, almost a Trojan horse, for deploying the very same kind of generalized digital ID system needed for the digital wall prototype. It builds the rails for population tracking under the cover of environmentalism.
That's quite a claim. Leveraging green policy for surveillance infrastructure. Okay, so that's stage 1. Secure the policy environment abroad. Stage 2. The funnel to U.S. states.
Yes. Once the system is up, running, and being tested in the Darien corridor, the engineered flow, including that fifth column component of 176,000 plus individuals from adversarial nations, is allegedly directed specifically towards U.S. sanctuary states.
Why sanctuary states?
Because, the sources argue, their policies of non-cooperation with federal immigration enforcement makes them ideal targets. They become critically overwhelmed by the influx, magnifying the operational chaos and the strain on local resources, precisely because they can't easily deport or detain large numbers. Oregon is cited as a prime example.
So the flow is directed to where it will cause maximum system stress.
That's the claim, which leads directly to stage 3, the profit. The crisis deliberately overwhelmed these states, creating a sudden, desperate, and massive need for solutions, a procurement emergency.
And who steps in to offer the solutions?
This is where the lobbying apparatus reportedly kicks in. Tech lobbyists organizations like TechNet are specifically mentioned, act as the crucial intermediaries. They approach the overwhelmed state governments, like Oregon's, who are desperate for ways to manage the influx, track people, provide services efficiently,
And persuade them to buy.
persuade them to use U.S. taxpayer money to purchase the very digital wall products being beta tested at the border. This isn't just big contracts for Microsoft CRM, but also for specialized vendors who integrate with that data flow, companies like Idemia for advanced biometric capture and management, or LexisNexis for identity verification and data fusion intelligence.
Okay, let me see if I'm following the logic here according to the sources. The tech sector allegedly plays a role in enabling and directing the crisis through the tools and potentially the influence. And then they profit massively by selling the government the technological systems required to manage the very chaos they helped engineer and channel.
That's the cycle described. A self-sustaining, profitable engine built on perpetual crisis. It creates, according to this analysis, a closed loop. The incentive isn't to stop the flow, because the chaos generates the demand for the sophisticated digital control systems, which are the real profit center.
The synthesis, the digital wall tech, becomes the lucrative answer to the engineered thesis, the overwhelming funnel.
And the whole cycle is funded by managing the fallout from the crisis itself, often using taxpayer money.
Which brings us finally to the endgame. So after tracing this whole alleged dialectic, the problem, the reaction, the solution, the profit loop, what's the ultimate point? What does this mean for the average U.S. citizen? The oikos, as the source material calls the homeland or household.
The documents argued the implications for the oikos are severe and multifaceted, stemming directly from the initial thesis, the engineered invasion.
How so? What are the claimed costs?
They cite impacts along three main lines. First, there's the obvious fiscal erosion, the sheer cost of managing the influx. They give examples like the city of Chicago facing budget crises, estimating costs upwards of $220 plus annually just for migrant services. Multiply that across numerous cities and states.
A massive financial drain. Okay, second.
Second, the public health vectors. The sources explicitly mention concerns about infectious diseases like tuberculosis, TB, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria like MRSA being introduced or spread due to the lack of comprehensive medical screening for such a large mobile population.
Public health risk.
And third, they circle back to the security risk of the fifth column. They re-emphasize those 176,000 plus individuals from adversarial nations as a significant, unvetted internal risk. A risk that, conveniently or by design, necessitates a massive domestic surveillance apparatus to even attempt to manage it.
So the initial crisis creates fiscal strain, health risks, and a security justification for more surveillance.
That's the argument. And if this digital wall system is really designed to manage this manufactured internal chaos, the documents make a chilling prediction about where this leads.
What's the prediction?
They predict this entire mission trajectory leads towards what they call Scenario 2.
Scenario 2.
Described as coordinated internal disruptions. The implication is that the external pressure, the border crisis, is just the first phase. The next phase involves leveraging the internal vulnerabilities, created the fiscal stress, the social division, the embedded adversarial actors.
Disruptions aimed at what?
The stated strategic purpose, according to the sources, is to cripple the U.S. capacity to project power externally by forcing the nation to turn inward, to spend all its resources, political capital, and security focus on managing internal crises.
It achieves a kind of strategic paralysis.
Exactly, a form of national exhaustion and paralysis, unable to act decisively on the global stage. The border crisis, in this view, is the Trojan horse. The digital wall infrastructure, built to manage it, is the hidden soldier, the control system that remains long after the initial crisis narrative fades.
Which brings us back to the ultimate aletheia, the core truth claim of these documents about seventh-generation hybrid warfare.
Yes, it's reiterated clearly. The strategic goal is dissolution, not destruction.
Explain that distinction again.
It's not about leveling cities with bombs. It's about algorithmically eroding the very foundations of sovereignty and national identity. The physical invasion thesis is the shock troop, the Trojan horse. The digital wall prototype synthesis is the control mechanism, the soldier inside. And the overall mission, the Aionios, is this gradual dissolution, achieved by normalizing total population tracking, biometric identification, and digital financial control systems perfected on vulnerable migrant populations before potentially being applied domestically.
And that normalization happens because the tools seem beneficial at first.
That's the insidious part highlighted. The very technologies used to maximize humanitarian outcomes, detailed case management for aid, financial inclusion tools, comprehensive data gathering to help are structurally the same technologies required to maximize security surveillance and population control. The more data you collect ostensibly for compassion,
The complete the control grid becomes.
exactly, the system is designed, they argue, so that the mission of assistance functionally enables the mission of control. It's presented as the ultimate dual-use architecture. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a tremendous amount of complex and frankly quite disturbing material here today. We've traced the source's claims through a full Hegelian dialectic,
We have.
starting with the thesis the allegedly engineered chaos of the Darien gap flow, moving through the antithesis, the high-level philosophical cover story, the technocrat Psyche-Smog, and detailing the synthesis, the specific kinetic architecture of the Microsoft Dynamics CRM prototype, the biometric gates, the financial rails, the intelligence harvesting, and that lucrative feedback loop involving carbon credits and lobbying.
I think the absolute key takeaway, if you boil down the source's technical argument, is the structural nature of this claimed digital wall. Its functionality is entirely dependent on the vast amounts of data collected initially under the guise of humanitarian aid.
The helping enables the watching.
Precisely. It reveals this fundamental operational tension, or perhaps synergy, where the mission of human assistance provides the raw material for comprehensive surveillance and control. It's presented as the ultimate dual-use system.
And this really leads us to the final critical question posed by the documents themselves. A question that shifts the focus from the border, from the migrants, directly back to the oikos, the homeland, the U.S. citizen. If this comprehensive system, mandatory biometric ID, linked to digital financial control, is perfected, normalized, and accepted by society as the necessary solution to the problem of global migration, what domestic crisis comes next? What future emergency, maybe a severe economic disruption, a widespread public safety scare, another health crisis, perhaps will be used as the justification for the final widespread deployment of this exact same system onto the entire domestic population?
That really is the unsettling question the sources leave you with, isn't it? Once the infrastructure of control is built and normalized, finding a new crisis to justify its universal application becomes the final step.
A sobering thought to end on.
Indeed.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging and keep seeking the truth.